This is The Explainer. We're diving into a high-stakes executive intelligence briefing on India. Okay, so everything we're about to cover comes from a document set dated February 4th, 2026. Let's start right here with this number. A massive 12.06 trillion rupees surge in the market cap of BSE-listed companies. And get this, that's in a single day. So what on earth happened? Well, the answer is right here in this quote. The one word that ties everything together today? Transmission. What we're seeing is this direct, almost instantaneous link between a geopolitical event, we're talking about a major trade deal here, and what's happening on the ground in the market. And it's all happening in real time, even while political tensions at home are clearly heating up. Bottom line, the wall that used to separate a geopolitical headline from a company's balance sheet, it's gone. It is completely collapsed. Now we turn to the deep dives. Let's break down the three biggest stories driving this new environment. So first up, the catalyst, a huge new trade deal between India and the US. What it does is cut reciprocal tariffs from 25% down to 18%. But here's the really big piece. It also completely scraps that separate 25% penalty tariff tied to Russian oil imports. Okay, so the anchor here is something we all basically take for granted, right? Trade deals are good for business, they cut costs, they create certainty. Simple. But here's the twist. The full details aren't even out yet. And because of that, the market is so on edge that it's pricing in the way the deal is being communicated, just as much as the deal itself. Every little press release, every clarification, it's suddenly a high-stakes gamble that could send things flying. So what do you watch? Simple. Keep your eyes peeled for the official joint statement and for any clarifications on which sensitive sectors, think agriculture or dairy, might be left out of the final agreement. All right, our second deep dive, the market reaction. And it was immediate, and it was huge. Just look at this. The Nifty 50 closed up 2.6%. The Sensex followed right along, jumping 2.5% in almost perfect lockstep. And it wasn't just stocks. The rupee strengthened by over 1% against the dollar. For a single day, that is a massive move. So, the anchor? It's the oldest story in the book. Good news makes markets go up. Pretty straightforward. But the twist is, this isn't just good vibes or general sentiment, no. This is a direct, quantifiable reaction to a specific policy trigger. The documents make it crystal clear. That changes everything for investor confidence and how people are positioning their money. It's pure cause and effect, happening right before our eyes. So the key thing to watch here is the currency market. Pay close attention to how the rupee moves once the full details of that trade deal finally drop. That's going to be your real test of market stability. Okay, for our third deep dive, we have to look at the friction building up at home. Because while all this good news was happening externally, inside Parliament, 8 opposition MPs were suspended for the rest of the budget session. The reason given? National security concerns. The result? A complete logjam. Now, the anchor belief here is that, politics is always noisy. It's messy, it's chaotic. And for business, it's mostly just background noise you can ignore. But the twist is that this isn't just noise. This particular conflict poses a direct risk to business clarity. Why? Because it means that business-critical information, like, say, the final details of that massive trade deal, is now much more likely to come out in bits and pieces through press conferences instead of a clear, structured debate in Parliament. So here's what to watch. Any more delays or adjournments in the budget session. And even more importantly, watch for a shift where major policy announcements start happening outside of Parliament at press briefings. Bottom line, we've got this huge positive signal coming from the outside, but it's being transmitted directly into a domestic political scene where the actual channels for getting clear information are breaking down. Now we turn to the undercurrents. Beyond the headlines, there are systemic shifts to watch. We're tracking 4 big shifts here. First, in banking, credit is getting tighter because demand is outstripping deposits. Second, for big tech, the Supreme Court is digging into the economics of data, which could open up a whole new can of legal worms beyond just privacy. Third, geopolitically, energy policy is now officially a bargaining chip in trade deals. And finally, on trade itself, we're seeing a much stronger willingness to use tariffs to protect key domestic industries, like pharma. And that point about credit getting tighter? Here's the number to prove it. The credit-to-deposit ratio is at 81.75%. That gap between what banks are lending and what they're holding is getting pretty narrow. Bottom line, the fundamental systems for credit, for data regulation, for trade, they're all shifting. Everything is moving toward a more constrained, more strategic, and frankly, more defensive posture. Now we turn to on the radar. We've got 2 weak signals here with the potential for some pretty big impact down the road. First, listen to this question coming from the Supreme Court. They're not just talking about privacy anymore. They're asking about the actual value of a consumer's data, and even this idea of rent sharing. Now, if that moves from a legal theory to actual practice, wow, that could completely upend the business model for every data company in the country. Second, there's this recent move to put anti-dumping duties on key pharmaceutical ingredients. Now, this might look like a small, one-off thing, but the documents suggest we should see it as the beginning of a pattern, a new playbook for using trade protectionism to lock down strategic supply chains. Bottom line, we're seeing warning signs in both the digital world and the real world, and they're both pointing to the same thing. New rules of the game are being written, not in Parliament, but in the courts and by the regulators. Now we turn to the final synthesis. So let's bring it all together. That core theme, transmission, forces us to completely reassess risk. Here's what's changed. The external risk profile got better, literally overnight. Here's what hasn't changed. The domestic political friction is still high, and it's actually getting worse. So the big takeaway is this. You have to throw out the old assumption that geopolitics and domestic policy run on separate tracks. They don't. They are now one and the same, connected instantly. And that leaves us with one final critical question for every leader watching. If geopolitical news is now instantly priced into your market, is your organization actually structured to react at that same speed?